Yesterday's price is not today's price. Why?
Welcome back. Dynasty Market Watch, episode 1.08. I'm Todd Halverson. I'm joined as always by Brian O'Leary and Matt Davis. This week we have a special guest, David Gautieri, joining us at Guru Fantasy World on Twitter, where his bio has always read, "A top tight end means more than you think, write it on my tombstone." People heard him a lot as the tight end guy, but let me tell you, David does more than just tight ends. We're excited to talk Dynasty market values. Welcome, David.
Yes, I do talk more than tight ends, but those are obviously my favorite. It's part of the bio. It's going on the tombstone at this point. We'll see if it actually ends up on my real life tombstone, but we're trending more and more towards that direction.
David, thank you again. Yeah, like Todd said, we're super excited to have you. We asked all of our guests this. How many teams are you in?
Not enough and too many at the same time. I'm in 36 Dynasty and 3 redraft, and I commish probably about a third of them.
Okay, so 36. That I'm in like the 50 to 60 range. So, and then I had one other question that this is kind of going a little off script, but so we talked. You and I talked a year or two ago. We're in one league together, actually, Dynasty Dumpster Fire, and I remember you and I talked and you described yourself positively as an ageist. Are you still in that same set of values, or is it kind of pivoting a little bit as you go?
I would say yes. I still consider myself an ageist in a positive light, in the fact that it is a huge part of dynasty market valuation. The age apex is real for every position, and players do start to get devalued at certain ages. So I do think that is an important thing to be conscious of. I will also note that my team in Dumpster Fire absolutely caught the wrong side of ageism in that one.
Tough.
And it's lived up to the Dynasty Dumpster Fire moniker. Is like perfect name for the league. And like I can remember that team because that was a Trey Lance and a Kyle Pitts team. So you can imagine how that
1-2 turn, yeah.
You can imagine how that team is going. And then I compounded that with trading up at running back. This was, I think, 2 years ago. It wasn't. I don't know if it was last year. But it might have been 2 years ago. So I was still. I've only been playing Dynasty for this will be my 4th season. So I'm still fairly new to the game.
We all have that one league where everything just, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Especially when you're in 36. Like, there's gonna, and probably more than one. Like I have maybe 1 or 2 where it's just like everything I do in this fucking league.
I mentioned tight ends. We'll talk David's tight end strategies and the Laporta Kincaid debate. And last week I announced I'm out on Kyle Pitts, so we'll get David's reaction to that. And of course, we'll always talk some trades. So we always start off with bull or bear. David, we'll let you kick it off. Who is your bull or bear for the week?
So I think the bear's the bad.
Bear's the bad.
The bear's bad.
So we're going with. We're gonna go with. I could go with 2, but we're gonna go with DK Metcalf. Just because I've dunked on James Cook enough for now. Maybe we'll dunk on him later, but DK Metcalf, man, it's so hard to just justify his valuation. It's like I want to keep moving him down, but he holds value on the name. That's the only reason like you can't move him lower at this point because he has produced over 14.5 points per game once in 5 seasons. He's been outscored by Tyler Lockett 3 consecutive seasons, including this year. He's at 12.2 points per game, 12.3 for Lockett. And now he's been outscored by JSN back-to-back weeks. And now we talk about the age, right? He's going to turn 26 in a month in December, which, all right, that's not old. Where it's like, all right, we're running out of time. He's a good receiver, but we're running out of time. And then we look at the situation. Him and Lockett both signed extensions through 2025. JSN's, he's on a 4-year rookie contract with a 5th-year option. Yeah. So it's like, how does DK get out of this situation where now we don't even know if he's the wide receiver? He hasn't been the wide receiver 1 in 3 straight seasons in point per game. Had another rookie coming in. And it's just like, man, if you can get somebody else who's just like attached to that name value, it's really like a guy that you have to look at moving and try to explore some of these leverage deals where, maybe you offload him for another older veteran. And if you can somehow still get a future 1-2 swap, like a deep injured Deebo Samuel, like I've traded DK. This is before the season started. DK for Deebo plus a 2025 1. I think you probably have to throw a 2 on top of DK now into DK and a 2025 2 for Deebo and a 2025 1. I don't know if you can even get that. But if you can, I'm taking it. Like that's the kind of leverage trade where I'm like, all right, at this point, he's not going to make an impact before his age insulation just evaporates. So I would rather get that future first, get another performer, Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin. If I can get that, maybe if I have to add some junk like a Kareem Hunt, something like to get that kind of leverage swap where I'm putting a 2 and turning it into a 1.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find any argument here. I mean, we've been doing this pod for a couple months now. I don't think any of us have really spoken positively about DK in those 2 months of episodes. I mean, any kind of allure that he had a couple seasons ago, I think is gone. I mean, couple years ago, 4 years ago, he was talked about with AJ Brown, and I mean that's just like a joke now. I also like the idea of selling across positions. Like if you can't tear down at wide receiver, I would sell him for straight up for the guy who's my bull of the week for the second week in a row. First time we've done this. Will Levis. I'm going to just keep it short. It's going to be like the same stuff I was saying last week. Really impressed with what I saw against Pittsburgh. Short week. Thursday games are always ugly. His stats weren't great touchdowns wise. I still think he made a lot of nice throws. So he's a guy that I've been buying. We're going to talk about some of the trades that I've made this week.
Maybe go ahead and give a couple of those trades.
And how many leagues are you in, Matt? Because if you made 6 leverage trades, I want to know how many leagues you're in.
I'm in 20 leagues. So
and he's made 6 leverage trades.
Yeah,
okay.
So 0% to 30% in the last week and a half or so.
Matt is an absolute trade animal, just for the record.
Yeah, you're not in any leagues
with me,
but I make more trades than like pretty much anybody in any of our leagues. And part of that is, especially with rookies, I make up my mind early. I'm willing to be wrong. Like you said in the beginning, we all have, wins and losses, swings and misses, etc. So Levis, he was incredible in his debut. Yeah. Saw enough in the follow-up game, wanted to buy some. So basically I've been sending like a mid to late 24-1, mid to late 25-1 in a couple different deals. One trade that I made was I gave up Trevor Lawrence and Jaden Reed, and I got back Will Levis and Devon Achane. Just really high on Achane. Another one I gave up Trevor Lawrence, 3rd round pick, and Elijah Mitchell, and I got back Will Levis and an early to mid 24 first. 2024 104 is what it's projected as. The most expensive trade, and all of us like yourself are big Brandon Ayuk fans, David. So Brian said this was a little too expensive. Todd did as well. I kind of agree with that. I was getting a little ahead of my skis, but I did trade Brandon Ayuk straight up for Will Levis, which is probably a little more pricey than I wanted to go. But yeah, so I mean, those are a rundown of some of my 6 trades. Obviously, I would not expect you to agree with Ayuk for Levis, but what's your position on Levis, David?
I feel like I'm a very similar position to you, but I just don't know if I want to go about it in the same way as you. Like, I don't think anybody was. There are very few people who are crazy high on Levis as a prospect. There wasn't a whole lot to like unless you're a film junkie.
Yeah,
because he just didn't check any of the analytical boxes. Like he's a 4-year player. He basically got forced out of Penn State. Like he didn't have any great passing seasons, and then he slipped to the 2nd round. So it's like, all right, how do you love this guy? But then obviously he came out 4 touchdowns in his debut, and as you mentioned, he passes the eye test. Like you see that this
the arm talent jumps off the screen.
Really. It does. You can see it. But that being said, like sending a random future first, like I would want it to be on a contending team like this year where I know it's like a late future first, or it's like I would want to be on the Levis side. Like if I think there was a poll, Purdy or Levis, and a lot of people preferred Purdy.
Yeah, I'll take.
And I was the guy who I like Purdy too. Like I can't in this year, like I could, but now that his price has risen, I'm like, all right, well, if I can sell Purdy for Levis in a 2-3 swap, even just something small, like a little bit of leverage, Purdy in 3 for Levis in a 2.
Yeah, I saw earlier.
Like
I saw earlier a Sam Howell for Levis swap. I was actually going to bring up a Levis for Howell with a 2-3 swap idea. Try to get the 2 on top of Howell. I guess you may not be able to do that. People are starting to get pretty high on Howell. At what point, like, let's kind of flip the script. We've talked about buying Levis. We talked about it last week. We've talked about it tonight. At what point, if you have Levis, do you start testing people in your league and seeing, okay, what can I get out of him? I think people saw a pretty good performance. It wasn't outstanding, but if you're selling, what would you want if you were going to sell? Could you move him and a second to get a Fields or a Lawrence? Could you pivot down like a Howell, like I said? If you're a contender and Levis is like an extra QB, could you trade him kind of like for a top end wide receiver, like the person did for IU? That might be what I'd be looking to do.
Well, that one that Matt mentioned, right, where it was Levis and Achane for Lawrence and Jaden Reed. Like even if you just put a 2 for Jaden Reed. For me, I've tried to view it outside the vacuum, because in the vacuum, sure, you can argue the left side, but for me, at least like my best dynasty teams and the most foundational principle is to go up the quarterback ladder and to get elite quarterbacks. Yeah. And if I can turn Levis into Lawrence, even if we can have a conversation, we could have a whole show on how Lawrence is overvalued due to his production versus price point. But he gives me an entry point to now add something to Trevor Lawrence or Patrick Mahomes. Like if I can go up the QB ladder and turn Levis into a guy with a round 1 startup valuation, that's how I want to sell Will Levis. And you probably won on the Achane value side, but he's got a round 1 startup player now who has easier opportunity to turn into.
So David, you're looking for
etc.
So that was the thing that I was running into when I was trying to buy Levis. Is everybody throughout all my different leagues had a very similar response. They were looking for a first round pick with some upside, like a playoff first that was like a top 3 seed guy. People weren't interested in that. What I had to do in both trades was get a first with some volatility either way, right? Like it could end up as 109, but it could end up as 104. And then the other thing is, like you said, where I had Trevor, people wanted to tier up, and then I was looking for a guy of high value like Achane to kind of facilitate that. But yeah, people were not selling Levis for less than a first with some upside, or like you said, tiering up for the elite quarterbacks.
Hey,
go ahead.
So I love the Levis talk, but we're going to have to rename our podcast pretty soon.
We can keep
with Will Levis, and I don't know if we want to pay the royalties for that. Anyway,
well, you should weight your time based on the most important things. Like I know we want to cover everything, but like if he's the most important topic right now, we should spend the time on Will Levis.
It's funny because we were on with Jacob last week, or for a special episode last week, and we talked about Will Levis for what felt like about 45-50 minutes. So
well, Jacob make anything feel like a 5-minute conversation is 45 minutes long.
All right, go ahead, Brian.
So real quick, I bought Levis twice this past for around the same price as Matt's low, like the future 24 25 But my bowler bear is a bear this week, and it's a couple different players. So I'm indecisive in the sense of picking one. So I'm going to go with a couple different ones. Kenneth Walker, Tony Pollard, and Zay Flowers. For various different reasons. I think Kenneth Walker's usage is dropping. I think they like Charbo. I think Seattle's kind of a weird situation. We already talked about this with DK a little bit. In general, their offense, Geno's been struggling this year.
Brian, are you selling for any one Kenneth Walker?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone. I'd probably sell anyone.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm giving a 1 for Ken Walker at this point.
It's
So you're taking the juggernaut teams first. That is 109 to 112. We'll say.
I mean, I'll shop. I mean, I'm not stupid. I'll shop around and see what I can get.
If
but
that's the best offer, yeah.
So
and also when I say anyone, I'm also talking from a player standpoint, like a player that's valued at a late one.
Yeah.
You know, if I have the team if I'm the team's 16-0 median, and they're the one offering me, maybe I go and I'm a little bit more diligent on looking for a player. But if it's just, a playoff late one, I'm fine selling if that's the best I can get.
So Kenneth Walker, I sold one Kenneth Walker, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on this trade. I think Matt and Todd have talked to you a little bit about it already. So David, this is a tanker. If you're not familiar with me, I'm like dumpster fire, for example. I usually plan on tanking year one. This is a year one league. I gave Kenneth Walker 24-4 and Ingram, so just disguising shit for Kirk Cousins and Quentin Johnson before this past week. So I was hoping for a little pop in Quentin Johnson. You talked about compounding your interest, right? My thought was hopefully I can buy at a decent price point for Quentin Johnson and then flip, or I have something really. So again, Kenneth Walker 24-4, Ingram for Kirk Cousins and Quentin Johnson on the tanker.
Yeah, that's not going to do it for me.
I'm going to help you out, David. I don't like it either. So I would want a little bit more. There you go, David. I broke the ice for you.
So just a little more additional context. This is kind of something we'll get into with Todd for a second, shortly, I think. But this is a super tight race, 101, 102. So to me, first of all, I'm a huge Kirk fan, but I think this solidifies me as 101, and maybe that's a haphazard move. I'm not sure, but hit me with be as mean as you need to be here.
For me, especially being in a lot of leagues, I try not to make moves below market value just to secure the 101 over the 102.
David, I'm about to give a monologue here in a minute, and I think you're going to like it then.
When we talk about it's shifting too, like there's gonna be some rookie drives for people take Marvin Harrison Jr.
Well, here we go. You know what? You just segued me perfectly. And before you steal my thunder, I'm titling my bull or bear this week "Collapse for Caleb: Cautionary Tale." This year more than ever, there's been a race for the 101, like we're talking about. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm fully on board with chasing the 101, not settling in the middle. It's legitimately a foundational piece for like my dynasty strategy. But another foundational piece is to not consistently make negative EV moves. I think we've gotten to a point where people are debilitating their roster for the future for one player. So people are making negative EV trades in order to increase their chances at 101. So not only are they losing value on the trade, but they're also putting the roster in a position that they can't contend for years. So like in a perfect world, I want to do a 1-year tank and then I'm contending. There's obviously circumstances where things don't go my way and it becomes a 1-year rebuild and then a 1-year struggle. But there's zero reason that you should have a team that's a 2-year rebuild and then a 1-year struggle, basically 3 years of your buy-in being donated. So this is my cautionary tale of consistently making negative EV moves to try to increase your EV on your pick. And I've used the term now consistently twice. And there are times that you can make a negative EV move to lose a trade, to increase your pick value so you can win in the long run. So like think Amazon, they'll sell stuff at a loss in order to earn your business so that later you'll buy products that they actually have margins on. Same with the trade. So maybe you lose one trade in order to increase the value of your pick. I have no issue with that. Brian just gave us an example very clearly of a Kirk Cousins trade. What I am referring to is people consistently are taking major value losses, 3, 4, 5 trades to improve their pick. And that's where the negative EV can really outweigh that 101 to the 102. So I am going to get to something. So David, I got a question for you. So there's polls I've seen of Marvin Harrison Jr., Caleb Williams, like dead 50-50 split, kind of what you're referring to, David. I think even if someone gets the 101, I could see them trading back to the 102 for very cheap. I'm pretty fine and satisfied to end up at the 102. Would I rather have the 101? Of course, but I'm not going to break my roster to do so. So David, what do you view as the value differential between Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. from a 2024 startup perspective?
I would say about around. I think Caleb's going to be 1-2 turn. He's going to maybe be in that first round startup valuation.
I think he'll be in the first round.
I think he definitely will be.
But Marvin Harrison, at third, 301? Like, he's probably going to be late too. So I don't think it's a whole lot of difference between those two.
Let me just give a little pushback here. I think it's, and maybe defining what a little bit is, but I think that's a first in terms of value difference.
From a startup perspective, I agree. It'll probably be a first, but from a rookie perspective, I think people will move back for maybe a 2, and it'll be someone that maybe they already have their quarterback set that they tanked, and they ended up at the 101, and they're like, I'd rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. I'd rather just draft him, but I'll just take your 2 and I'll move back a spot.
And just, I totally agree with what you're saying as your premise, Todd, of don't debilitate just don't destroy your entire roster just because I want to get 101 blindly, right? This trade, from my context, right, is I have 5 what I view top 13, 14 receivers. I have Anthony Richardson, and then I have Kyle Pitts. So it's like one of those things where it's, to me, that value given away is potentially setting me up for a major value gain. So it's one of those things. Yeah, I agree.
You didn't get that team making 4 or 5 negative EV trades, though. That's right. Probably a one-off.
So that's the distinction.
I'm cool with those.
Yeah.
For me, there's a couple things. Like, for one, the argument is less about the startup value differential between Caleb and Marvin Harrison Jr. It's more about that entry point. Like, if I want to trade for a Patrick Mahomes, a Jalen Hurts, a Josh Allen, it's easier to offer back a Caleb Williams than to offer back a different position, Marvin Harrison Jr., because then you're addressing different needs and it can complicate things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, when we talk about rebuilding, like, why do we have to even stop at 101 versus 102? Like, why is 103 a bad rebuilding pick? We talk about Drake May.
Yeah.
He's going to be valued as a round 2 starter pick. And I think we look about what can you do with Caleb Williams at 101 sure, you can do a lot with that pick. You can do a lot with the 103 next year too. Like we talk about getting into a Kyler Murray. Like, you're going to be able to get into top quarterbacks with the 103 as well. You're going to have a lot of different avenues to do different things as well too. So I'm not looking at teams where I'm even the 103 and being like panicking, like, how do I get out of the 103? And that's not a huge panic point for me.
Not to shift the entire topic too much, but I think based off of the strength that we're seeing in 2023, people are probably going to overvalue the strength of 2024. Not that I dislike the class. I like the class, but I think people are going to have some recency bias in the sense of like, hey, they might have missed out on Zay Flowers or Addison or Kincaid or whoever.
Round 2, Tyjae Spears, things. Yeah. That round 2 is.
There will be always be.
I think that's going to factor into people's decisions for sure. So
one guy you didn't mention was CJ Stroud, or maybe you did. I missed it, but no. CJ Stroud versus Caleb Williams. Matt, who are you taking there?
I think right now you have to take CJ Stroud. You guys know I've been kind of even a little ahead of the market on Stroud ever since week 1 or 2. I wasn't really ahead of the market before the season. First week or 2 of the season, I was like, okay, kind of like Levis, just immediately sold on him, immediately trying to buy him, even at high prices. But even until this past week, I don't think I would have put him ahead of where I project Caleb to be. But 470 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's on like a very short list of less than 20 guys that have ever done that, ever, non-rookies. So I think you have to take Stroud, even acknowledging that the lack of rushing is going to be a factor with Caleb. I mean, Caleb can run. He's going to move. I would project him for, I'm not a numbers guy, but 30, 40 rushing yards a game his rookie year probably. So Stroud's going to have to be good enough as a passer to make up for it, but he looks kind of like he might be right now. So
I think Stroud's going to be, if we're talking against startups like this offseason, I think Stroud will be 106 to 108. I'd agree with that. And I think
Caleb's going to be in that tier too.
David, where would you have Stroud as we sit today? We're not really projecting into 2024 offseason yet, but like as we're sitting today, where would you have Stroud in that QB ranking?
I still don't think I'm putting him above, Lamar Jackson, or even Burrow or Herbert, but he's obviously in that tier now. I would probably have him at 7: Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Herbert, Burrow, Jackson, Stroud. And we look at this rookie season; it's literally insane. You type out the rookie pace, and I'm looking at the number: 4,824 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. That's his pace right now.
That's MVP, right?
Like what?
He's a legit MVP candidate.
4,830 touchdowns and 2 picks. What? That doesn't sound real.
So this is going back to a point you made earlier about maybe Trevor's a little overrated production-wise. So you have Stroud over Trevor right now, it sounds like.
You have to, because nobody is giving you you're not going to sell Lawrence for Stroud Plus anywhere, but you will sell Stroud for Lawrence Plus in some places. So
David, if I'm a student, I hopefully I'm going to impress you with my listening skills here. So if you have Stroud, I'm going to assume that your next move is to try to tier up into that Allen, Mahomes, Hurts group.
Sorta. I mean, I like getting picks. I mean, that's just my natural inclination, is to think of ways to get similar players and picks, because picks are money, and I want money, and I want to be able to buy more good players with money. So yeah, I could go pay Stroud Plus and go get Patrick Mahomes, but maybe
What's
I can
that cost? What do you think that costs right now?
Before I even think about that, how can I get the plus is the question. If I can just go send out CJ Stroud in a 2025 3 for Lamar Jackson in a 2026 2, because I still feel like I'm on the leverage side getting a 2026 2 over a 2025 3. And we talk about Stroud, all he's done, he's still not averaging 20 points per game in fantasy because he doesn't run the freaking ball. He's below 20 points per game. Lamar has averaged 20 plus points per game 4 consecutive seasons, 5 now, including this season. He's hit 28 points per game. So I would like Lamar straight up. But if I can go out to everyone and say, let's find the guys who want not only Stroud straight up, but they want to give me some picks too, they want to be convicted about it, that's the trades I want to make, where it's like, all right, that's how I want to sell Stroud, is get a guy I want more and get a good pick on top. Or pick swap. Even a small pick swap, 2-3 swap.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we're insulated in the sense of, like, Matt and I, especially in a lot of leagues we're in, like, there's a lot of Lamar truthers, so I don't see that happening. But
Lawrence,
that's definitely something
Lawrence
to investigate.
Plus. You could definitely some Lawrence Plus right now in some leagues.
And now that there's hype that he's coming back, I don't know how easy it is to do this, but to me, the guy I'd look at is Kyler. Like, can I get Kyler in a first for Stroud in the late second or something like that?
Hey, so I made a trade recently, and again, bury me, but I have a ton of Kyler, and I do like diversifying when I think it's like a lateral move. We talk Kyler, Konami code, but I just traded Kyler for Tua, and I'm pretty underweight on Tua, so it's straight 1-to-1 Kyler for Tua. I love Kyler. His upside's insane. I do think there's some risk that I wanted to try and get away from him, and getting someone like Tua, I think, who I'm underweight on. I couldn't have hit accept faster. Like, that was a main trade, and it was just instantly boom, yep, accept. So tell me I'm crazy.
I still prefer Kyler.
Yeah.
But obviously I would like to exploit the injury leverage there. I think Deshaun Watson's another one too, where you could explore Stroud for, all right, what kind of plus are you willing to give me on top of Watson? A future first, and what else?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'd be a
one.
little uneasy about even just taking a first, but if we're talking what else?
There's people like this, especially like when you're in 36 leagues, you want to assume every offer you're putting out that it's the highest Stroud, the highest person on Stroud in every league. Like, you just have to have that assumption when you're making trades, that you're dealing with the person who values Stroud at his highest. Like, that's how you have to go into, I feel like, every negotiation.
So something a little about me real quick before we transition to the next thing here. Kyler and Deshaun Watson are my two highest owned quarterbacks. So I love this idea because I'm team besides, the football player, Kyler.
But you don't need any more Watson shares.
I'm all set there, but I highly recommend anyone if you can investigate getting a serious plus to Watson to move Stroud during the hype all day. Yes.
All right. So we've talked a lot of quarterbacks. It's time to give the running back a little bit of love here. We talked a whole lot of quarterback talk. So, Matt, last week you kind of gave a bear case on Gibbs. You were out on him. So maybe kind of reiterate a little bit of that to David, and David kind of give us some feedback here.
Yeah, so I mean, being out on Gibbs at cost, it really has nothing to do with the player. It's just how I like to build my teams. I don't really roster any high value young running backs. I like to build my teams around old running backs, store my future value at quarterback, tight end, wide receiver. So all these guys that we're going to talk about, Bijan, Gibbs, ETN, Jonathan Taylor, literally roster 0 shares of any of them. But I do think that David Montgomery is going to be a big part of the Lions' backfield as soon as he returns. I do think that the split is going to be a little more even than it was. I think Dan Campbell has even kind of acknowledged that. But I still think it's going to be a pretty frustrating week-to-week experience for the Gibbs owner. So last week I was talking about if you can move off Gibbs for someone like Chris Olave, I'm trying to do that. That specifically the type, or Garrett Wilson, or any of those young stud wide receivers. I'd much prefer to own them. So I still kind of think that nothing has changed on my Gibbs stance there. I do think it's kind of interesting that it does seem like Gibbs and Bijan could be kind of closing the gap just because people could be frustrated with Bijan. But I don't own any Bijan. Brian, you own a lot. I'm sure you guys own more than me. So I don't know if to me, the only Bijan question is he available for 2 to 3 firsts right now? I don't think his price is necessarily dipped really, but you might be finding some owners that are willing to deal.
First off, David, tell him he's crazy that David Montgomery is affecting his top 5-ish dynasty running back ranking, please.
He's not crazy.
Yeah,
he's not crazy. I don't think he's crazy either.
About the lifespan of dynasty running backs, and don't get me wrong, Jahmyr Gibbs with his receiving profile is a lot more immune to the lifespan arguments where, all right, they're just going to fall off a cliff. He's got this receiving upside. But we're talking about a 3-year contract that they gave David Montgomery. He's not just going into the night tomorrow. And we talk about the ebbs and the flows of the dynasty market. It's a long-term game, but it's very much a short-term game. Yeah. And we're very high on Jahmyr Gibbs. As soon as David Montgomery comes back and is getting 15-plus carries, and you rest assured Dan Campbell's going to find a way to get him 15 carries a game. It's going to impact Jahmyr Gibbs' market value, and that's just what's going to happen. And we can pound the table all day about his talent. We were doing that earlier in the season. It doesn't matter if he's not.
So I'm old enough to remember.
If you look
I'm old enough to remember the Colts acquiring Trent Richardson for a first-round pick. And
if you look down in Jacksonville, Doug Peterson, he's not talking about, hey, we got to get Tank Bigsby 15 carries a game. Just why am I rostering Gibbs over ETN?
I agree. I would flip Gibbs for ETN, and I don't know about Olave straight up. I'm not in that Olave superstar group. I maybe I'm just biased against late declare wide receivers and guys who are not yak threats, but I looked at his profile, he's good, right? His reception perception is fantastic, 83 percentile versus man and press. I think he was some 70-something percentile versus zone as a rookie. You can obviously talk about the yardage per out run, target per out run. That's good, but I don't know that he's this superstar receiver people want him to be. He doesn't break tackles. He came into the NFL. We talk about late declares, all right? Yeah. And I'm biased. Coming into this year, there was, I believe, 18 late declare receivers drafted in the first round. Mike Williams, the only one since 2010. Only one with multiple 1,000-yard seasons. Mike Williams. All right, now we're going to have Devontae Smith. She's going to join that list. It's been better. Brandon Ayuk's going to join that list. Olave, but it's like, how many of these late declares are like stud superstar? Like I've heard Olave compared to Justin Jefferson. He could be Justin Jefferson this offseason. That is ridiculous to me, and I feel like that's still the valuation some people are kind of having baked in. I view him as more like.
I got you a comp. He's like rich man's Deontay Johnson at this point.
But Deontay with a 8 out of like 10.
Yeah, I was gonna say
he's got a high 8 out, but he's very inefficient. He doesn't have yak, and you're seeing a bunch of targets. Like for example, but
he's very inefficient in what? In half of a season, was he inefficient as a rookie? Like I don't know if that's a full scale argument against him yet.
He's a guy that's not hitting his expected fantasy points like you would want so far in his career.
How was he versus expected as a rookie? Like we have multiple seasons on Deontay, and I think the usage is totally different where we're talking about deep A-dot. But I agree with the quarterback, like that's how they're using him in a deep A-dot role. And if it's not there, these are prone to high variance. Like if you're in a deep A-dot role.
One thing we'll agree on, David, is having Garrett Wilson above Chris Olave. So
absolutely, like if I could trade Jahmyr Gibbs for Garrett Wilson right now, I'm doing that in a heartbeat. Chris Olave, I want a plus. I want
for the record.
Olave.
So am I. That's not really. That's selling Gibbs very high.
I mean, we can move off the running backs, but real quick. So David, like, where does Breece Hall fit in here? Like, so to me, Bijan is clearly the running back one, right? And CMC is kind of in his own little tier of he better be on a contender, obviously. And he's my running back 2 clear cut. But then like Breece, ETN, Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, those 4, I don't really know how to rank them. Like I said, I'd have Gibbs at the end of that tier. I'd have JT and ETN above him, and I'd have Breece Hall as RB3. Wasn't sure if you had any kind of strong take on any of those groups. So.
I would love to put Christian McCaffrey at RB2. The only reason he's not, I mean, I had him at RB2 all offseason. Breece Hall's been listed as a sell in my rankings.
Okay.
I'm like you guys. I don't want to roster, especially if they're not producing at that level, and they've already lost some insulation to an ACL tear. Like, I would rather sell Breece Hall for McCaffrey plus. The only reason he's above McCaffrey is because I think you can get McCaffrey plus some spots. But from a contender, I'm not trading McCaffrey for Breece Hall straight up.
Yeah.
I don't like his value. I would rather trade him for an elite wide receiver, Garrett Wilson. Maybe I can even get Garrett Wilson plus, like, that kind of thing. I think you can pivot down from Hall to maybe Bijan plus right now, to ETN plus. So
we're talking Olave, Garrett Wilson. Those guys were generally viewed as rookie stud wide receivers. Late declare aside, people love them year one. So I want to just talk on a couple of receivers that we haven't talked a ton about recently, and that's Tank Dell and Jordan Addison. So obviously we talked a lot about Stroud. So I really am interested to hear your guys' take. David, why don't we start with you on Tank Dell? He's obviously popping. He was definitely not a super sexy prospect that I know, like, that he definitely doesn't fit your mold in that sense. So are you kind of believing this side of Tank Dell, or is it kind of a flash in the pan?
I will say, I feel like I've been at some points kind of too dismissive of situation. Like Tank Dell, I don't love him as a prospect. We talk about that late declare bias. Like, he was I think a 5th year senior late declare. He was at a small school. Then he went to Houston for a bunch of years. Round 3 pick. He's undersized. He's 5
Super
foot.
tiny guy, yeah.
5'8", 165 pounds. Like,
Tank.
He was productive at Houston, which matters. And I think one big mistake I made was waiting early declare over college production. So I don't want to make that mistake again. Like, that was, like, for example, I talked about this. I had Treylon Burks ranked ahead of Chris Olave in my rookie rankings because they're both productive in college, but one was an early declare, one was a late declare. I didn't want to put the productive late declare above the productive early declare.
Yeah.
But then we look at the reception perception profiles, and it's like Chris Olave was clean. Treylon Burks was like red. Like, it was bad. It was just red flags. And I want to kind of try and shift away from putting the early declare ahead of that. And I want it to be college production, draft capital, and reception perception, and then we'll talk about the declared status. And Tank Dell was productive. He wasn't drafted very high. I mean, 3rd round. And the reception perception was good, but I don't know if it was fantastic. I'm trying to look it up right now. Tank Dell, let's see.
No, that's my recollection too. I think.
So he was 45th, 47th, and 83rd percentile versus man zone and press in his prospect profile. So it was like he's good against press, like people who can't get their hands on him, but slightly below average man zone. So I think he's an NFL player, right? Like, but if you could sell for a future first, see you later. Goodbye in an instant. Even if you got to add something small to it, like get the future first. Like I just don't know if he's.
Are you selling for two twos?
It depends where they're projected. Like
I think that's the value range he falls in right now. Like the 2-2s, a super early 2, or like nobody's paying a 1 yet. I will
happily pay an early 2 for Tank Dell right now, just so we're all on the same page.
But here's my problem with buying like guys after like boom games like that. He's gonna have a letdown game that you have an easier price point. Like people are going to react game to game with him.
But a 2 and a 3 is not going to get it done at any point now.
It's not. No,
it's not. It's going to cost 2 twos.
It's 2 twos to start, but I guess that's my point. Right now, people are very, very high.
I still prefer Nico Collins by a fairly wide margin.
I'd still take Nico.
This is a Nico Collins podcast. So that's welcomed.
Yeah, we're all high on Nico. I don't know. So Jordan Addison, I don't use Fantasy Calc as much as you guys. So Jordan Addison's wide receiver 12 on Fantasy Calc. KTC, he's wide receiver 9 right now. That's a little pricey for me. Like if again, a guy that we like, if I can change out Addison straight up for Ayuk, I'm probably doing that. Yeah. So I think we're kind of all trying to probably look at selling Addison or we're shopping him at least at top 10 wide receiver price, right?
I think you might be able to get a plus, honestly, depending on the owner that you're talking to on Ayuk. And that's, kind of what David was talking about earlier. If you can get those extra picks or value, you're building a nice little setup right there. Todd, what's your take on Addison here?
Well, I did last week. I did the wide receiver tiered trading little 10-minute podcast, and that's really what all I'm talking about is doing those tier downs or trade within tiers and get a little bit of a plus. So, I mean, if I can do Addison and trade, I mean, at this point, you might be able to trade it, quote, down to London. There's a lot of people that are London truthers that have him, so it might be tough. I probably have London and Addison in the same tier. I define trading straight for Devontae Smith, but down to Ayuk. I talked about Ayuk and Devontae Smith on last week's wide receiver tiered trading podcast, and those are the guys that I was trying to trade down to and get a little bit of a plus.
Yeah, so real quick, a guy that we all think is pretty gross. I'm curious if we insert him into this right now. So you guys taking Jordan Addison and a mid-24 second, or DK Metcalf and a mid-24 first. So you can tier up that way and get a tier or turn a second into a first, but take the guy that nobody wants technically right now, DK Metcalf, and give up the potential of Addison. I
would take that so fast, but I feel like people are still clinging to DKs that they wouldn't give me that. I don't know.
So, David, I made a trade recently, so I'll get your feedback on this one. This is about a week ago. I traded DK in a second for Josh Downs and a first.
I like that. I like the first side.
Yeah.
So I think, that's another just tiering down. I'm on a tank team trying to tier down.
I think that might have been a recommended trade in my last week's newsletter. I'm gonna look it up.
So David, we talked about you're the tight end guy, so we would be remiss not to hit a little bit on some tight ends.
Oh no, I did recommend that in my newsletter though, except there was no 2. I recommended DK for Downs in a 20.
Okay, so I gave away a free 2. All right.
No, but I don't mind the 2. I like to try and set the bar high in my suggestions. But that's funny. So, we're exactly on the same train of thought.
So Laporta and Kincaid, they're a hot topic right now. I want to get to them, but first, maybe just give us like your little elevator speech on what your dynasty tight end strategy is.
Oh yeah, so I have developed a highly sophisticated strategy, which basically evolved from me not knowing what the hell to do at the tight end position. like, essentially, I was highly vocal about liking the top tight ends, as you mentioned. It has been pinned as part of my bio. Top tight end or die, essentially, is the motto. And people started thinking I was a tight end guy. Like I knew more about tight ends just because I loved to draft Travis Kelce. And they started asking me like questions. And I was like, dude, like, I don't know more about tight ends than anybody else.
I just like the
the
really good ones.
literally. So I was like, all right, I got to figure something out to like at least have a process. So I just started charting everything. Like I just wanted to, my approach is always as holistic as possible. I want as much information as possible so I can look at every angle possible. So I started looking at basically their combine scores, their early declare status, their draft capital, a lot of their player profile information, their college dominator, their college yards per reception. So we're looking at efficiency, their catch radius. So I'm just charting guys essentially height, weight, draft capital, early declare, 40, vertical, dominator, college yard perception, catch radius. And then once they hit pros, I'm starting to chart them as well. Their NFL production, their points per game in PPR, their yards per route run. So my process is really just trying to look at everything. And in terms of Laporta and Kincaid, I like both of these guys a lot. I had them in the same tier pre-draft. I moved Kincaid up. I separated them post-draft because Kincaid went round 1, and I like the landing spot. In hindsight, I shouldn't have even been looking at the landing spot. I should have just been looking at the draft capital alone because Laporta was drafted basically the second, I think the first pick, second pick, third pick of round 2. So he was right there. Both of these guys check essentially every box. They weren't early declares, but they were drafted in the top 35 picks. They were both productive in college, which a lot of people like to just say, oh, college production doesn't matter. The only guys who I have who are valued in, I believe, the top 40 dynasty tight ends who are below a 10% college dominator rating are Dawson Knox and Darnell Washington. That's it. So essentially, if you don't hit 10%, Luke Musgrave, but he was injured in his final season. He was pacing to be like 20% dominator, but that's it. So if you're not producing in college at any point and hitting even like a 10% dominator, that's a huge red flag for me. 20% is green, where we start getting green. So we talk about Laporta, 25% college dominator. Kincaid was a 34%. So both of these guys were productive and they were highly drafted, and that's essentially like the two main things. So you have to like collegiately productive, highly drafted tight ends. Everything else, so you have to like those guys because they have a very high hit rate. We talk about round 1. Bean Counter has put up a thread. If you search, I included it in my Kyle Pitts thread a couple of years ago. But essentially, 90% of first round tight ends put up at least one top 12 season, and the top 12 is not a lot, at least one top 12 season in their career. 90%. Yeah. So they're essentially guaranteed to put up a top 12, and 50% of them put up a top 6 season drafted round 1. So draft capital matters a lot. College production matters for tight end, and I think a lot of people like to dismiss both of those points. So I put a lot of value in those, and I was very in on both Kincaid and Laporta because of that. Laporta's shown more as a pro. He's got higher grading, PFF grading. He's pacing for higher totals as well. And we have the athletic numbers on him, the 4.59 40, where that's like not just green, but green, like the extra green in the checklist. So I like him more than Kincaid. I still have him technically a slight tier above him, but I do think Kincaid is closing the
game. So David, is it approaching, you've talked about, I think it's a pretty clear theme, gain value when possible. Do you think Kincaid and Laporta are, in terms of, if I own Kincaid, you're not trading him for Laporta straight up, right? It's not that type of differential,
yeah,
right?
I would trade him straight up for
okay,
Laporta.
all right.
Yeah, straight up. Yeah, I'm taking the player I have ranked higher straight up. That doesn't mean
I see them as
I'm trying to
as
get a
almost
plus,
like a-
but I don't see I don't see you getting the Porter plus for Kincaid. So I would be happy to take the Porter straight up.
I kind of
David,
see
last-
them as a Jamar Chase and Jefferson in terms of like I don't really see the point of trading one for the other. If
I'm
you're
not
getting
going
a plus
at-
for
yeah.
either,
I'm
not
going
like in
out
the
of my
sense
way.
of like value wise, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point where I'm not going out of my way to add on top of Kincaid to turn him into the Porter. Like that's just not something I would rather spend the value elsewhere because I do believe in Dalton Kincaid.
So, David, last week I gave my sell Pitts declaration. Matt and I went head to head. Matt was very pro Pitts. I have been a Pitts backer from the very beginning, drafted him in lots of rookie drafts. But I made my declaration that I am done, and I've started to sell out. And I've pivoted to Hawkinson a couple times. I've tiered up to Andrews. But I'm done. So where are you at on Pitts?
David, before you answer that, I just want to mention one of the funniest tweets I've seen over the last few weeks was from you. I think it was a couple weeks ago. You listed all this shit that Hawkinson is not very good at, and then you were like, "If this sounds like slander, that's exactly what it is," or something. So I know you're going to be on my side with Pitts over Hawkinson, but yeah, go ahead.
And no, it's not Pitts over Hawkinson. I
No,
would love for it to be that, but it's not anymore. And
so you're dropping Pitts down out of your top 4 or 5 right now.
Yeah, right now he is at 6. It's Laporta, Andrews, Hawkinson, Kincaid, Kelsey, and then Pitts, because you can sell all those guys for Pitts plus. And if you're selling them for Pitts straight up, you're leaving meat on the bone. And that's just how the rankings work. And I think that's what has made me a better dynasty player, to be honest, is having to rank. When you force yourself to rank, you have to understand who is actually going to get the plus here. Like, and what happens if you actually make this trade straight up? If you're trading Hawkinson for Pitts straight up, what are you doing? Like, you should be getting a plus regardless of what you think, because if you're in one league and you want to play convicted ball, sure, but TJ Hawkinson is just valued above Kyle Pitts at this point, and that's just, he's scoring a lot more than him. You have to find, how do you find a leverage point to get Hawkinson plus for Pitts? You're not selling Pitts for Hawkinson plus anymore. It's just not happening. And
no, I don't think you can get a plus anymore. But at the same token, I think the guy who has Pitts, man, he held him through a lot of shit already. I
was that guy. I came into the year with 45, almost 50% Kyle Pitts, and it's been going down.
Yeah, no, I saw
you.
I see you've been moving some off. I saw the AJ
early in the year. I was making moves because I had a lot of Garrett Wilson coming into this year. I was very invested in Wilson, the whole Rodgers as well.
Yeah.
And when he went down, I started pivoting to AJ Brown. So I sold Wilson and Pitts for AJ Brown, Hawk, and I even got a 2-3 swap on top. Yeah. So I was very happy with that. But those deals are gone now.
We're talking about sexy tight ends, so why don't we move into something that's a little less sexy? And those are the vets. I talked about David's ageism, in a positive manner when we started. But a vet that I really talked a lot about last week, and I really still think he's a buy, especially he didn't have a great game this past week, is Alvin Kamara. He's discount Eckler. Like, Eckler is still carrying that DK Metcalf name brand. Granted, he has production to back that up, but he's getting a lot older. And if I can get Kamara plus, anything, really, I'm doing that 10 out of 10 times. It's a no-brainer to me. In a PPR league, Kamara he's arguably a better asset than Eckler right now, and not viewed as such.
I agree. Aaron Jones and Kamara are both. To me, I'm looking at both of those guys, Jones and Kamara, the last couple of weeks, and I'm trying to see who's cheaper. Going after them, and then I think Mixon. I just don't own any Mixon, so I don't have a good feel for how his season's going. But I know he can be another productive option. But what do you think, David?
Oh, that's funny. You're very good at leading into segments without intentionally even knowing you're doing it. Because I made a trade with both Aaron Jones and Mixon. Because I feel like those guys, the dynasty market has shifted so much, and we look at the startup ADPs of like the RB12, the RB15, the RB24, and I posted a tweet earlier this year. They shifted by almost either half round or a full round or more from last year to this year. So basically, at every point of the RB market, they're going a half round in startups later or a full round later than they were last year. So it's been so discounted where guys like Aaron Jones and Mixon, who maybe were paying a future 1 before, like as a contending team. Now you're getting these guys for a future 2. Like I paid Jerome Ford +3 for Aaron Jones last week before he had this good game this week.
Love that.
I made another trade where I traded Puka Nacua. This was a 2 tight end league. I traded Puka Nacua, Chigo Okonkwo, and a couple of 4, I think 2 2s and a couple of 4s for Olave, Mixon, and Jones. So I viewed it as basically Puka for Olave, and then Chig, 2 2s and 2 4s for Aaron Jones. And so basically 2 for Aaron Jones and Mixon a piece, like, and with a Chig and a couple 4 thrown in. And that was huge for a contending team. I still freaking lost this week in like a must-win matchup. But I do feel like a lot more confident about my flexes in the next couple weeks, because at a certain point, these guys are just high volume players. Joe Mixon pacing for another 270 plus carries, 1,100 plus rushing yards. He's not coming off the field. Aaron Jones, 45 plus receptions in 4 straight years. He's still like a 3 down back. Like these are good RB2s where you can get very discount prices. We talk about some of the overrated players. Kenneth Walker early in the episode. You can sell Kenneth Walker for Joe Mixon at first. See ya. Buy Kenneth Walker. Like those kind of deals, even if you have to maybe do a 1-2 swap, like, those kind of leverage deals where you're getting the first, and here's a productive RB2 on top.
We'll do one trade of the week and then kind of do our buy sells of the week to get on out of here after that.
I think one is that what I made, and one is kind of hypothetical of what I'm probably going to be making this week, because I haven't had time to send the offers yet. I've been writing the newsletter for the patrons. But I would say I've just been kind of saying farewell to like some of these guys who maybe I was in on the past, and maybe I still have some shares across 36 leagues, but some of these contenders where maybe I need this, maybe I need that, it's time for these guys to go. And that's like Rashad Bateman, who, I loved,
or like a Burks or something.
Yeah. Well, I traded Rashad Bateman, Darnell Mooney, and a 4 for Adam Thielen. Like, and this is a contending team, needed flex. Like, all right, it's time for you to go, and I hope you do well on their roster, and for the remaining shares of my portfolio. But it's time
to do well.
And at a certain time, you need to just cut bait and focus on. At the end of the day, we're trying to win games. Like the purpose is to get the highest scoring players and to win games. So if you can kind of move these guys who have fallen, nobody wants other than a rebuilder who's got an Adam Thielen who they don't know how to sell the guy. Like nobody else will give them anything. Those are the type of Josh Dobbs. Like to jump ahead, like I think we're talking about like a buy. To finish the show.
Lead us right in.
Josh Dobbs, guys, like this is the guy who I'm buying. I don't really have to buy him because I was claiming him for $0. Like when nobody thought, when people were obsessing over Clayton Tune, I was claiming Clayton Tune for $0 too as well.
Are you seeing him as a longer term asset, Dave?
Like a Geno type emergence?
I think that's in the range of outcomes, but for me, it's more about the ability this year. We talk about Joshua Dobbs rushing upside. The only quarterbacks averaging more rushing yards per game than Joshua Dobbs this year: Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields. That's it. You heard me correctly. Joshua Dobbs is averaging more rushing yards per game than Jalen Hurts this year. Joshua Dobbs is averaging more rushing yards per game than Jalen Hurts this year. He is literally qualifying as a quote-unquote Konami code according to the standards. Like 5.5 rushing attempts is what qualifies. He's at 6 attempts, 36 games. He is a Konami code quarterback by the book definition. And then we talk about, all right, now you throw him into an offense that is leading the league in passing attempts before he got there. Minnesota's number 1 in passing attempts with Kirk Cousins. Arizona.
Are you paying?
I have to keep running. Kirk Cousins was number 1 in passing attempts with this team. 20. Arizona was 20th with Josh Dobbs. So you bring him from the 20th in passing attempts to number 1, even if they drop to 5th, 8th, 10th. The passing is going up. He's a Konami code rusher. He has legit QB1 upside when you put him in this offense. So, yeah, I'm buying into Josh Dobbs. And, yeah, if I got to sell Bateman for Dobbs straight up on a team that needs a QB, see a Rashad Bateman. I wish you luck on the teams that I still have you.
Matt, why don't you give us yours?
I'm selling Ken Walker at his current market valuation. I'm trying to get, Swift, Aaron Jones, Kamara, Rashad White plus. Swift, you're going to get a smaller plus than Kamara, but either one, I'm trying to do something like that. So I'm selling Ken Walker. Todd, what about you?
Yeah, I'm buying Sam Howell. I think on some redraft rankings, he's maybe around like QB 12 to 14 rest of season I've seen, maybe in the QB 15 range. If he's in that range as a first-year starter, I think we have to start trending him up a little bit as far as QB dynasty ranking. I would be trying to get him on some tank teams, especially where maybe you don't have a lot of QB value. Maybe just try to get him for a couple seconds in something. If you have a ton of picks, I wouldn't mind sending one of those really late firsts for Sam Howell. So Sam Howell, my buy of the week.
So for me, I am buying Cooper Kupp, and it's really for a couple of reasons. I think he's a good player, but the Stafford injury is devaluing Rams guys. He's been a little less productive. Puka Love, and then I think a lot of people that were rostering Cooper Kupp have probably been struggling because he was out, or potentially been struggling. So he's been out, and then he's not producing what they think he should be producing, and maybe they're a middling team that wants to start thinking about tanking, even though it's kind of too late. So to me, I'll send a late one on a strong contender and try and add Cooper Kupp. I think that's definitely a move you can make right now.
All right, David, this has been great. Can you remind everyone where they can find you on Twitter and your Patreon?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Guru Fantasy World, WRLD, no O. You can make the character limits for that. At Patreon, patreon.com/Guru Fantasy World. There is an O in that one. And you can just go to the website as well, gurufantasyworld.com. We actually have a website now. It's going to have my whole history of making the case threads. It's going to have a free snippet of my dynasty rankings. We have an encyclopedia there as well, some strategies, a dictionary. So you can check that as well there.
Yeah, you're making the case threads. Those are really good. So I think you did a really good job with that.
Yeah, I've seen them. Definitely agree.
Thank you.
All right. And then you can find the rest of us on Twitter. I'm Todd at Dynasty SFlex. You can find Brian at Brian_O'Leary1. And Matt is at Dynasty Peasant. Don't forget, later this week, I'll be releasing episode 2 of the wide receiver tier trading. So in close, Matt is selling Ken Walker. I am buying Sam Howell. Brian is buying Cooper Kupp. And David is buying Josh Dobbs. Thank y'all for the continued feedback. Please do us a favor and go to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Give us a rating and review. Any likes and retweets of podcasts are a great help. For David, Brian, Matt, and myself, thanks for joining episode 1.08 of the Dynasty Market Watch podcast. We're out.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.